With all the different players that you've interviewed, were there any that surprised you with their approach or technique, something that you weren't aware of before approaching them?
I mean, everyone. I
Everyone.
probably learned something from every interview that I've done. Rarely have I done an interview where I thought, oh, yeah, that's exactly what I expected to see.
Oh,
Right.
gotcha.
Even where you have, like, I knew that Albert Lee was a downward pick slanter because I could tell just from the structure of the lines that he was playing. Like
Hmm.
a lot of these lines that were 2 notes or 4 notes or 6 notes per string. Whenever you hear that, that's a clue that a person is pick slanting in some way
Yeah.
because you want to play an even number of notes. But then when we looked up close at his playing, we saw some weird tendencies like, oh, well, hey, how come when you're a downward pick slanter, you're not supposed to be able to switch strings when you play a downstroke? Because
Yeah.
it causes the pick to just kind of dead end
Right.
in the string using like a rest stroke kind of thing. And this is a very natural thing for downward pick slant. So when you play a downstroke, you're kind of buried there and you can't get out. But Albert is famous for just downstroke and then boom, right up in the air to the next string. And so he's making this weirdo curve movement. I didn't know what the hell that was.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know when I filmed it. I just thought, I don't know. When you don't know that something exists, you can stare it in the face and not even notice it.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
like Wonder Woman's invisible jet. Like you don't even see it, you know? So I was just like, oh, I don't know. He's fudging something, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, and I label all the clips like, you know, arpeggio and scale or whatever. And I put them on a disc and I didn't look at him for 10 years or whatever, 5, 6 years. And then we started doing this. And then I looked at the footage, knowing what I know now. And I'm looking at this. I'm like, man, this shit is weird.
Yeah.
Like, look at that. Like, that's a whole different, you can't take that movement for granted. He's doing something else there that I didn't know what it is. And we call this cross picking now. This is this,
Yeah.
It's like what the bluegrass players do.
Yeah.
And he has little bits of it in his technique, and that's how he seems to quote unquote break the rules, right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
So it's just one of many, many examples. But I mean, so many. And Michelangelo Badio uses this technique where he actually plays through muted strings, which I call swiping.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
instead of getting over the string, you can actually just, like, if you want to do the Paul Gilbert lick, this thing. You have that one note on the string by itself.
Yeah.
Sorry. This note. That note there, right? Well, the theory is you jump over the string, play the note, and then like sort of jump back, but that's a lot of jumping. You can actually simplify that by just not jumping over at all and hitting the G string.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now you'll hear it if I do it aggressively.
Yeah.
You hear that harmonic there because I happen to be over a harmonic fret.
Exactly.
But let's move this to a fret where I'm not. Now maybe that string change is a little chunkier than normal, where you're hearing.
Yeah.
But at high speeds, especially with high gain, I mean, your fingers are sort of muting it.
Yeah.
And you don't really hear it. It's throwing some right hand muting too. And a lot of people probably do this. I discovered I was doing it. I thought I wasn't doing it. I didn't know. How could you not know? Well, this goes back to what we're talking about. It's very hard to know. These things happen at such microseconds of time. But you know what? Why can you play this lick? So many people probably play that lick and play right through the string and don't even realize they're hitting it.
Right.
Because they're using a high gain sound and they're muting it and they don't even realize.
And
so, tons of things.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and that's the beauty of the subconscious mind and how the body works. I mean, one of the things I encourage when I'm teaching is I like to have them feel things out first. The more you can do by feel, the less analytical stuff you have clogging up your brain. However, when you run into a situation where you're not getting it, then that's when you look at, okay, what am I doing? What can I do? And that's when you can become aware of the stuff and implement exactly what you're talking about. And then once you do that, then you focus on, okay, that's what I want to do. How does that feel? And then that feeling just becomes natural, and then you can play without all that analytical thought, you know? So
absolutely. And that's kind of the teacher, like what you're describing here sounds like you being your own teacher in a way.
Exactly.
Right? You're guiding yourself to these feels, and then you're allowing that sort of subconscious thing to take over.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a good teacher does, whether it's you teaching yourself or whether it's a teacher teaching someone.
Right.
I would like to think that the best teachers can be super technical in this way, but not necessarily need to expose the student to that.
Exactly.
Right? Like, they can lead the horse to water, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
If you just guide and you get them to do it. And if you've ever, I'm sure you have actually probably worked with kids who are just kind of very quick on the uptake.
Yeah.
And you notice you give them an inch and they start doing it. And then
Yep.
you don't have to, explain everything to death. So, that's an amazing, when you see that process happening, I think it goes back to what you're saying about how much stuff happens at this subconscious level and how quick we are to do it.
And one thing I find when we are working on something, a lot of times I'll ask my students to close their eyes and play. And they're like, no way. And then actually they do better with their eyes closed because that's less information going through the process, And that stuff's real interesting. And then seeing the technical aspect, like for me, this has helped me as a teacher to explain what I'm seeing. And again, you don't have to bombard them with all this information. You just see where the problem is, the inefficiencies lie, and then you can show them just this one little move and tell them, how does that feel? And next thing you know, they're starting to implement that. And that's great.
Exactly.
And you're bringing awareness to this stuff that, like you said, was shrouded in mystery before.
Yeah,
but that's great.
And I think that's our ideal future, is where this stuff is common knowledge. It's not viewed as some shrouded in mystery thing.
Right.
It's just like, this is what teachers who are technical will know. And regular guitar players will know it if they like it or not have to know it. And if you take a lesson, then someone guides you very gently towards these basic things, and then you're good to go. And we're just trying to bring that stuff out into the open.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Now, there are some players who may not seem to favor one downward or upward pick slanting, and they just play, their lines are so vast, they play whatever is fit for the line. Like I'm assuming like Martin Miller and Andy Wood have various techniques. So do you find many players like that, or do you find a lot of players have their preference and they base their lines around that?
I think everybody is patterned. I just think it's the way people learn.
Yeah.
So whatever that patterning is, it could fit all sorts of different categories, right? But those guys, I mean, Andy Wood, you ask a really great player to play a lick, you'd be surprised how consistently they play that lick the same way every time, right? So whether he prefers this pick slant for one thing or another thing, or whether they use cross-picking, both guys have incredible cross-picking abilities to do these arpeggio type things with alternate picking. They look very different when you film them, and you look at Martin's technique is all this Yngwie-like finger movement happening. Yeah. And it's really, he had no idea he was doing this, and yet you or me would look at him in 2 seconds, you'd be like, what's that? That's when I interviewed him, that's exactly how I'm like, what the hell's you do? What are you doing? He didn't know, and yet the rest of us are like, that's it. What is that?
Yeah.
And Andy's got a totally different way. Andy does a lot of this two-way pick slanting type movement that you see in the forearm. Yeah. So everyone's pattern. It's just you've got 50 ways you can do a thing, and then you check off 5 of the boxes, and that's you. Yeah. Right. And it's kind of like if you film yourself speaking, you're going to notice the same hand movements, the same little ticks. Even the people that are so-called, eloquent speakers have, totally patterned ways of saying things and phrases they use all the time without realizing. Right. And this is why comedians can do impersonations. Like there's no one, well, this is a weird statement, there's no one that cannot be impersonated, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody's got a set of patterns and things that they do and use. And we like to think of like, oh, well, guitar playing, it's improvisation, man. It's my art. It comes from nowhere. Not really. Yes, to an extent, but there's probably 80% of it that is like you play me 2 seconds of Joe Pass, and I know, even without having heard that solo before, I know who that is. Yeah. Because there is some set of ingredients that he's choosing from, and mechanically, yes, the same thing. So I wouldn't say there are any players that don't have preferences. They just might be less familiar, or maybe they're more of a mishmash. Right. Whereas the beauty of the Eric Johnson and the Yngwie techniques, one of the reasons why we like to look at them, is that they're so specific and consistent. Yeah. There's just 1 or 2 ingredients, and you do those ingredients. Of course, ironically, Yngwie and Eric do all this finger movement stuff, so there's some complexity there that most people probably don't do. But like Marty Friedman's and the downward pick slanters in particular are kind of monolithic in that way. Their techniques are kind of easy to describe, and they draw from that all the time. Right. So the other formulas might be a little bit more of a salad, right? Yeah. Like where it's in a mixture of ingredients. But there's definitely, patterning there, absolutely, all the time. Yeah. Now, with you've developed a very high level of playing as well. And when I'm talking to
other guitar players and teachers, and everyone comments, you know, he's such a great player as well. And you kind of have, that's kind of a side. You're like, listen to what this guy's doing. Then you rip it off and you rip this line off like it's nothing, you know. So that brings up the question, like, do you have any plans for, like, do you ever play live, or do you have any plans for a CD of your own music, or?
I haven't. I haven't played live ever, actually. Not once. Well, that's not entirely true. Like, I think we played the lunchroom once in 10th grade.
Oh, there you go.
We had, like, you know, we got our drum machines out and we did our Beastie Boys type of. That's what we did. We tried to sort of dramatize some of this in these web features that we made, where it's a bunch of us in a room with drum machines and me with the Boss distortion pedal. You know. You know, like a lot of like white guy rapping happening over that kind of guitar part, which in retrospect probably would have been cool. We should have kept up with that, but you know, we went on and became boring. But no, I haven't done any of that. And what we're doing now is actually, in a way, I love music. I'll do it my whole life, of course. But what we're doing now is also exciting to me, and it involves a wide range of things that I would never have got to do otherwise, in terms of the tech and the writing and the interviewing and all this stuff. I feel like if you've watched any of our things, and you've seen more of like what I like to do in that one spot than you even would get on a record.
Oh, okay,
but you know, I'm sure that could be fun to do, but it's just one thing at a time. And I think you know, what takes up most of my focus right now is trying to put together, you know, this mission, right, of understanding the guitar technique, becoming good at it, and putting together materials that are as easy as possible for somebody to learn from.
Right. Yeah, great. Now, you have such a vast amount of great content on YouTube that's free for everyone, but you also have your Pick Slanting Primer and your Masters of Mechanics series. Could you talk a little bit about that and just maybe demonstrate some of the things that are in there that may not be in the YouTube videos?
Sure. Well, so we've kind of fallen backwards into the business side of this, which is what things do we make and sell. And I think we've fallen short in a lot of ways, especially very early on, in presenting some of the stuff in a way that would be easy for someone to understand. And I feel like each time we tell the downward pick slanting story or any of these techniques, we get better at telling it.
Right.
And so the initial stuff was sort of fun and dramatic, and I still think that fills a kind of a void, at least in terms of one way that things can be presented. And then doing more straightforward tutorial stuff is probably what we focused on over the last year or so. That's this Pick Slanting Primer, where you've seen some of this, where I'm kind of talking to the camera and doing more of a traditional instructional type commentary. So there's a lot of that, and the interview series, this Masters Mechanics thing you mentioned, that's where we go out and do interviews, continuing interviews with all these great players and try to learn more about how technique works. And so each time we do one of these things, I learn something else that I can't do. And it takes a certain amount of, you know, you can't be super thin-skinned, because you'll just walk out of a meeting with someone like Andy or Martin and just be like, man, I really suck even more than I thought I sucked. So, you know, there's that. But so the way that we present them now is we sell some of these instructional things as download products, so you can buy the Pick Slanting Primer, and it's kind of a compendium of tutorials of some of these basic concepts, like pick slanting concept, downward pick slanting, upward pick slanting, and you know, brief profiles of players that use these things and how those techniques work. And then the Masters Mechanics side of it is actual full-length interviews with some of these players, like Martin Miller and Andy Wood, and Steve Morse, Albert Lee, all these players that we've been lucky enough to meet with. You can watch the entire interview, and then we actually cut out all the things that they play, and deliver those as tablature with slow motion video, so you can actually try your hand, literally speaking, at doing some of these things. And that includes things that I never even thought we'd be looking at, like mandolin technique, and acoustic bluegrass players like David Greer, who's unbelievable. And I mean, his stuff, you don't even have to be a guitar fan to like that. You just put that on, and anyone would just be, wow, that's beautiful music, because it is. So, and the techniques those players use are really pretty crazy. This cross-picking stuff, that they just seem to be able to do alternate picking across almost any kind of weirdo pattern. And you're like, how do you do that? And to them, that's normal. You know, what's funny is it's very much a country city mouse. Like, they can't do this. They don't know how that works because they don't do it. It's just not in their repertoire. But they can do all kinds of like arpeggio. Steve Morse kind of arpeggio sort of things. And they're like, no problem with that. Like, that's what they do all day long. But, you know, this kind of... They're like, whoa, that's fast. But it's a totally different hand movement, and that's just their repertoire relies on, or depends on being able to play those kinds of arpeggiated patterns, especially when you're the only player. When you're an acoustic guitar player, you're like a one-man kind of band, that kind of stuff. So Steve Morse is like the closest rock player that does those sorts of lines. And he's done them for years, and we all looked at him like he was from outer space, right? Because he was kind of. No one in rock did those things. So, so yeah, in terms of we're looking at all these techniques, and when we learn more about them, we try and put them into tutorial stuff. The big project for us right now is to put it on the web, on our own website, where you can actually just log in, because what we don't really have a good way of doing is like Wikipedia-izing it, where you go in and you can like click around and browse, and it's all organized in a real sensible way. And we realize the only way to do that is on our own website, because then we can make whatever structure we want. You can have pages for things, and then we've been demoing the Sound Slice player, which I don't know if you know about that, but it's an online method of playing tab along with video.
Oh, wow.
And it's really, really neat. It's a web service. You hook into it. If you're a guitar teacher, you can use it. You can upload your tab files and video of you playing and synchronize them. And then the students can actually play the stuff back. You can select whatever bars you want, slow it down, repeat it, loop it, everything. Basically like Guitar Pro, except on the web with video. And we saw that and we're like, all right, this is perfect, because I'm sick of downloading zip files and unpacking 100 licks and where are they all located. So I want to just get especially if you're on a phone or a tablet or something and you're in your music room, I just want to like, you know, click, click, oh, there it is, play, you know, and really easy. So we've been doing a lot of this tech stuff lately with the web, trying to get all of our stuff kind of ported over to that. And this way, you know, as soon as we discover something, we can, you know, we can just fit it in the library somewhere, kind of like Netflix, but for guitar nerds.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time out, and also for putting this stuff up on the web. I mean, it's definitely been beneficial to me as a player and a teacher, and from talking to numerous guitar players, like I was just at NAMM in Anaheim, and you catch up with a lot of players that you haven't seen for a while, and you know, you start talking about this stuff, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's great! Isn't that crazy how this guy plays like that?" And so it's definitely struck a chord. Struck a chord with exactly. But yeah, it's been great, and it's definitely interesting, and it's very well done. So thank you for that, and thank you for taking the time today to talk to us, and we look forward to what's in store in the future.
No worries. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Thank you. Take care and have a great day.
You too.